Stop being surprised by the outcomes. All right, guys, welcome to the podcast. We're talking about inputs and outcomes, but we're going to use some different terminology to try to explain it a little bit better. So, as always, these podcasts are in combination with the Anchor Point newsletters that I release every Monday at 6 a.m. If you want to look more into a polished version of this, a little bit shorter, a little bit more brief version of what we're talking about, you can look at the newsletter. It'll be linked down below. So we're looking at outcomes here, and here's the most kind of outside looking in, or even reframing how we see it will make the most difference. So think about when I say outcomes, let's just say, feeling good, feeling bad, successful business, health outcomes, finance, whatever it might be. Let's think about the outcome. A lot of us think that outcome is random, like it's luck or bad fortune, or we see others succeeding or either others who don't succeed. And we talk about like this deserving it or not deserving. And it's really nothing to do with that. All it is the inputs of what we do. So let's reframe it to this. Let's think about a recipe for a second, right? When you think about a recipe, like, I was going to say cake, but let's just do brisket because I'm a dude and I live in Texas, right? The perfect brisket has a recipe, right? And if you follow that recipe to a T perfectly, what do you think the outcome would be? Like somebody gives you the best recipe in the world and you follow it exactly. You're going to have a pretty good mouth-watering brisket at the end, to no surprise. Now, let's just say you want that really good brisket, but you don't follow the recipe. You don't smoke it long enough. You don't let it rest. You don't use a combination of salt, pepper like you should, whatever it might be. It's not going to be good, right? It's not going to be as good. So we look at recipes like, oh, it's just inputs and outputs, but we look at life's outcomes as like luck and fortune and deserving and undeserving or whatever it might be. And that's not a really good way to think about it because that does not give us any control over it. When we think about others of like, man, they don't deserve that success. We're looking at the end product saying, I don't know how they got there, but I don't like it. Or, why don't I have the six pack? Or why don't I have the finance investments that person do, whatever it might be. Well, it's not because of like good luck, bad luck. Now there are different starting points, right? But there's still so much that you can control on it, right? So I'm not just sitting here saying like, yeah, there's people that are born into wealth. Obviously there's some advantages and disadvantages, but that's the given, right? But when we take the outcomes into our control of like, let me analyze this as if it's a recipe of like, I want this outcome. I'm going to study the recipe, get the ingredients, and apply it the way it's supposed to. All of a sudden, things become a lot more achievable, and they make sense, and they become obtainable, really, is what it becomes. And you got to create an ownership of yourself of like, I am responsible for adding the ingredients to a successful life. So here's a couple examples. So let's say you feel awful all the time, like headaches, not feeling good, lethargic, no energy, but you look at the ingredients into your life, or you look into the input, and you're doom scrolling all the time. You're not getting good sleep habits. You're not drinking enough water. You're not eating healthy. You're not moving your body. You're not exercising. Yeah, that's not following the recipe to probably feeling well and having energy and doing those things, right? That's actually the recipe for feeling awful. So if you start to reframe that to like, okay, well, what is the recipe to feeling well, energetic, and having, at the end of the day, having energy? Well, you're actually going to change those inputs and add to the recipe, right? Now, one of the factors is time. How long you do something matters. And, just like smoking a brisket, you can't just follow the recipe, but shorten the hours it needs to rest, or the hours it's smoking or whatever else, just to stay on the same dumb analogy. But when we start changing it's where like, okay, what is the outcome? Okay, let's say building a business, right? There is so many like recipe books, cookbooks out there on business, right? Even a specific type of business. You can do deep dives and studies on it and understand like, okay, this person had, they invested this much time. They chose a location like this. They bought this. They had this much of a buffer. That whatever it might be, there's a recipe for it, whether it's starting a business or being successful in any career or capacity, like whatever it may be. Somebody's probably done it before you, and somebody's probably put information on it out there. And now that information is easier to get than it's ever been with either AI, short form media, the amount of content that's out there. Like whatever you want to achieve, whatever the outcome, the recipe, or whatever the end result wants to be, it's there. And there's probably people trying to teach you how to do it. Right. So it's one of those, so like eliminate the excuse that it's just luck or fortune, but try to look at those who have done it or have achieved it and start asking, okay, what did it take to get there? Do I have that? Do I have the ingredients? Do I have the capital? Do I have the willingness to risk? Do I have whatever it may be? Right? When you start asking yourself what it is, then it's like, okay, the first step might not be starting it. The first step might be obtaining the ingredients to get there, or start understanding the input to get there. It may not be right now, but at least gives you a mindset to actually start working towards. I mean, even things from like parenting and faith and leadership and all of these things that seem to be like, oh, they just have it or they don't. It's really not. Like, I mean, and I wouldn't say like I'm sitting here acting like I'm a great parent or not, but it's something I try really hard on. It's stuff that I look up. It's stuff that me and my wife do. Like we do what we can, we do the best. And the end result is there's still a lot of variables, right? But even in a situation where the result isn't like, I need to make this much amount of money, maybe it's just, success, whatever success looks like, or maybe it's just being the best I can be, or maybe it's being innovation of inventing something that's never been invented before. There's even stories out there of those who've done that, and the recipe is probably going to be similar to what you've done, even though the exact thing, the outcome isn't there. Like it's going to take a lot of failure, of failing over and over again and persevering, but despite the failure, it's going to take time, investment, pouring all of yourself into it, whatever, even the more difficult things to explain that like they're tangible. Like I said, being an innovator or trying to do something or starting a business that's never existed before, that business may not exist, but people have created a business that didn't exist before, if that makes sense. So even in the weird, vague, abstract, like forms of success, there's still a lot of, information out there to give you what you need to input to achieve that output. Let's see. And I think for the most part, I really think we know most recipes. Like, and I think that they're going to boil down to some very simple concepts of like, I know what it takes to be healthy. I just don't want it bad enough. And I know, everybody thinks that I could have invented that, or the ShamWow, I had that idea, or the bendy straw, or whatever it might be. It's like, oh, I had that idea, I could have done that. But really, like, we think we know what it is, but most time it's just like you're not willing to invest what it takes to achieve what it is, but you know what you should do for the most part. But there are some times where you really just don't know, and you have almost like this uninformed optimism, which we're going to get in a second, of like, oh, I'm just going to start doing this, and you realize it's way harder than you thought. It's like the recipe you're trying to impress your wife with that you start, and then all of a sudden you're 2 hours in and the kitchen's a mess and you haven't even cooked anything and it doesn't even look that good. So, and I'm going to get into that process, because anytime I think we take on a new endeavor of like, hey, I want to achieve this, I want this outcome, I want to start this. This is the 4 stages that I've seen the most in my life, specifically when I start something new. The first one, you can call it maybe uninformed optimism. Another way to think about it is like unconscious incompetence. And the whole idea of that is like, you don't know what you don't know. Like, you don't know how hard it is. You don't know the skills you lack. You don't know what you don't know. You're just kind of ignorant to what it is. You're naive, right? Like, you don't know how hard it is to start the business. You don't know how hard it is to, run a marathon. You just say, oh, I'm going to do this. And you don't realize what it's going to take. And that's actually kind of bliss, because that's when you probably have the most fun. But then you soon get to the next stage, which is going to be conscious incompetence. You actually understand, you're like, crap, this is harder than I thought. Now I know what I don't know. Now I know how hard it is. Now I know why people don't just start quitting their jobs, starting businesses and becoming inventors, or whatever it might be, or writing the book, or doing the artwork, or doing full-time content, travel, whatever the thing is. You now realize why it's not as easy as everybody thought. Passive income isn't so passive, or whatever it might be. Like, so you're now to the point where it's conscious incompetence. And the next one is going to be conscious competence. Now, this, a lot of people, I think in my life too, I have in several places, will quit before they get here because it's so hard to get here. And that's conscious competence, to the point to where you found the recipe, you understand what it takes to be successful, but you're so intentional. It still takes effort and time and extreme focus of like, I need to add this much and sprinkle this much and do whatever it might be. But it's going to be like, I know I have to look up the amount of calories these foods have and follow this workout program and make sure I'm doing this. And it's very conscious and very heavy mentally to do. Like, you can do it, but you know how difficult it is. You know how to do, the accounting for the business now, but it's still really hard. this is when you start seeing success. And if that's repeated, you can actually get to the point of unconscious competence, to where like, I'm good enough, I really don't have to think about it anymore. And there's really not a lot of places in my life to where I think I've really, achieved the, unconscious competence. I'm trying to think of some good examples. I mean, the simple skill sets of like sports skill sets, right? Like, when you're first like playing basketball, you really have to think about pivot foots and where you're, what's the travel layup line, like what knee do I bring up, how do I finish, how do I hold the follow through, all these different things, how to break a press, how to, whatever it is when it comes to basketball. You have to be you get from the point of where I have to think about it and I can do it, to I don't have to think about it anymore. It's second nature. Swing, it could be swinging a golf club. It could be, there's so many different areas in your life, and you've probably gotten to this point, whether could be writing or, shading and highlighting on artwork, or it could be, putting in, like, another place in my life is just submitting and understanding the finance side of a job, to where you're putting in POs correctly and pulling from the same accounts. That used to take you 10 minutes to do one thing, and now it takes you about 30 seconds and you're just flying through. You're not looking at the sheet to reference. Like, I mean, there's so many examples here. Even literally, once again, following a recipe. Like when you're cooking, you've cooked chicken Alfredo for the 100th time. You don't need to look at the recipe anymore. You just know what to add and do, right? So start looking at things in your life in that point of like, okay, I want to do this. Is this just uninformed optimism? Is this just unconscious incompetence, which nobody wants to say they're incompetent, but really, if you've never done it before, by definition, you kind of are. So that's where it's important to think of like, okay, outcome, input versus outcome, recipe versus end result, however you want to say it. If you start looking at it from that perspective, it's going to save you some heartache. It's going to save you some, like, what did I get myself into? Understanding what what the thing is going to cost before you actually start spending your time and resources on it. But what I will say, out of everything I've ever done, that's been worth doing. I've done a lot of dumb stuff that's not worth doing, that I don't recommend. But out of everything that I've done that's worth doing, there's 3 ingredients, for the same analogy, but 3 input or 3 characteristics or 3 commonalities that I've invested, that have always have the highest yield, and it was a requirement for the things that grew me the most, that had the most outcome, the highest level of achievement and feeling of success, right? The first one is wisdom. And the way I define wisdom, and there's a lot of different definitions, but the way I define wisdom is applied knowledge. So knowledge itself is just trivial, but wisdom is when people actually apply it, right? It's kind of the difference of, I think I didn't mention this in the newsletter, but there was I think it was the Big Bang Theory. Yeah, it was Big Bang Theory, where they were talking about, it's not a bunch of just kind of nerdy guys, astrophysicists, really smart guys, where they were talking about, oh, somebody's car broke down. Does anybody understand combustion engines? And they all raised their hand. And then they asked, can anybody work on the engine in my car? And like, nobody could. So it's the idea of like, you can know something, but if you can't apply it or have applied that knowledge before, you're really not wise. So anything that's required anything that's been worth achieving has required wisdom. And there's really, I think, 2 ways to get wisdom: the hard way and the easy way. The easy way is you find people that are wise and you go make them your mentors, and you seek them and you ask them 1,000 questions, and you respect them, and you just, make, their time is so valuable, because they can give you 50 years of knowledge in a few hours, just talking to them and going back and forth and asking the right questions and saying, yeah, don't do this because this didn't really work because I tried this. That will save you from doing it. And that leads me to the hard way. The hard way, once again, it's applied knowledge. I've looked up something, now I'm going to try it. I'll give you an example. Like, this is in my life right now. I wanted to do something nice for my wife and get her, and we're going to renovate a part of our bathroom so that she could have a freestanding bathtub. And we had just like a normal inset one, and she was never happy. Like, her main hobby in life, I think, is taking, really, baths. So I wanted to honor her with that. That's what she likes doing. So anyways, for her birthday, I get her this bathtub, and the whole mindset of, how hard could this be? I was in the unconscious incompetence. Oh, I'll just rip that bathtub out and I'll put this one in there. So then I start breaking the old bathtub out of there, pulling the tile off the wall that comes with the drywall, having to shut off lines and do all this. And I'm like, holy crap, this is way harder than I thought. This is conscious incompetence. And then I'm like, okay, so what do I do now? At this point, I start looking up YouTube videos and start applying the knowledge that I see. I look up the short form, I see the 30-second snaps of people redoing their whole like bathroom on TikTok or whatever else. So now I'm actually slowing down and slowly learning a skill of how to drywall and patch drywall and to tile and to grout, all that stuff, right? And I've never really got to the point of unconscious competence. But coming back to wisdom, this is where I have people around me, my father-in-law, who has done this, built houses from the ground up and has rent houses and done anything and everything it comes to a house. I invite him over. He helps me, and why would have taken me 10 days took about 1 day, and I learned in the process because of his wisdom. He had applied knowledge that I didn't have. So I was gaining it the hard way when I was applying the knowledge and how difficult it was. And then I get to the point of like, let me just invite somebody who actually knows what they're doing, my father-in-law, over, and he helps me with it, teaches me, and then that's applied knowledge. So, man, wisdom is required. It is part of the process. And there's a funny quote that, wisdom is the thing you get right after the moment you needed it. So it's the whole idea of like, it's almost always learned in hindsight or learned the hard way. But I think the only kind of fix to that is seeking mentors of those people that you respect, that do it, that have the skills, and then attaching yourself to them, asking 1,000 questions, inviting them out to lunch, buying them lunch just to listen to them. That's been the best. If there's one advice that my whole content and everything else could do, it's find mentors and attach to them. So the second characteristic that applies, or a trait that applies for everything in my life that's been worth doing, is courage. And this is not like saying I'm like a courageous person. I'm actually the opposite. For the most of my life, I would really classify myself kind of as a coward, of scared to take risks, scared to risk anything, taking the safe route in most options. Fearing, not doing something because I fear what others are going to say or do or think about it, not doing something because I might fail, a perception of others. So for the most parts of my life, I've really struggled with taking the risk. And, I've wanted to create videos and create content and write and put myself out there for quite a while, but I really haven't done it. And that's why. And, the only way to combat it is to do it scared. Like that's it. Like that is what courage is. It's like you have two guys, if you think about it, that are scared to do something, whatever that something is. Both of them have that fear in them, but the one that's courage is the one that makes a choice to do it anyways. So when you start fearing that or feeling that fear, like there's, or like that risk of, I'm scared to take the jump. I'm scared, that's going to be a limiting factor to anything worth value. And two things that I've realized on that: one, what I fear likely never happens. Like this huge judgment of shame, like Game of Thrones, like walking through the street with a nun behind you yelling shame type stuff. That stuff never really happens. Like the fear, I think Alex Remori says fear is an inch deep and a mile wide. So it looks like this thing that's, powerful and consuming and gonna overpower you, but you start stepping into it and you're like, oh, this is not near as bad as I thought. Something that I've done to help combat this is to define the fear, articulate it, say, okay, I'm feeling this anxious thoughts of this concept, write it down like to a very, very, very detailed, like I fear that this may happen, and write what this is. Most of the time it's either illogical, unreasonable, and unlikely, to be honest. It really is like, well, what could really go wrong if I make a video that's kind of awkward, where I'm stuttering a little bit, I'm trying to get better at speaking, and I post it online? I've done it several times now, and all that's really happened is, I have some good friends that encourage me, get some views, and that's it. And what I've been scared of this whole time, I've done it, and I'm like, oh. And then you get into the point of like, oh, this is like exposure therapy or immersion therapy, where it's like, hey, do the thing that scares you, and you won't be scared of the thing. So when it comes to courage, like take the risk, like, whatever, there's some elements in my life, and we'll talk about faith in a second, but joining a Bible study, starting a Bible study, asking others how they interpret the Bible, asking questions about, hey, just approaching them in that standpoint, or seeing somebody who is just, I kind of respect because they're successful to some degree in an area that I'm working with, and say, hey, what advice would you give somebody in my situation? So for one, you've conquered a fear, and two, now you have a mentor, right? And almost everyone who has been in that situation wants to help others. Like other people trying to do the thing that they have achieved, they'll want to help somebody do that. Because for one, they're gonna have a common interest, but two, they knew what that struggle was. That's what I found out. Like anybody who, when I was going through like my principal certification or getting into leadership, other principals, other superintendents, other whatever, they all wanted to help me. They knew it's hard. They know it's hard, so they don't want to see others fail. So that does a lot. It conquers the fear of probably talking to people and having some judgment, and two, it gives you, once again, back to the one, which is going to be wisdom. So yeah, that's what I would. That's kind of how you conquer that. That's what's worked in my life, and every time I've conquered a fear or used some courage in any way, it's been probably the most instant reward, because if nothing else, if everything else falls on its face, I'm not regretting the fact that I didn't do it. And that's the guarantee. That's the only guarantee every time. So, last one of the three, discipline. Good things, the things in life worth achieving are hard to achieve. And by definition, if they're hard, you're not going to want to do it. At some point, it's going to suck to do it, to train for it, to practice, to upload, to record again, to try again. Like it's going to get hard, and it's probably going to get inconvenient, and you're probably going to lose motivation. Like training for marathon, ultra marathon, dopamine rush when you sign up, dopamine rush when you're talking to friends about it. But then the miles kick in, and then it's, for me, 11 o'clock at night, and I'm in the middle of a 15-mile run, and I'm like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. Or I had a horrible day at work, and I get home and there's 8 miles on the training plan. I'm like, this sucks, but I still have to do it. There's days where I'm really tired. The kids are struggling, just one of those tough nights, baby's teething, that kind of stuff. And like, I'm uploading a video every week. Don't upload the video. There's a matter of discipline. And the way I've defined discipline, and this is more through, as an administrator over discipline in the school, like talking about, as an assistant principal, a lot of times you deal with the kids that get in trouble, right? I defined it to a kid one time. I'm like, wow, I need to apply that to my life as much as this kid probably needs to hear it. And discipline is doing the things you don't want to do to achieve the things you want to achieve. And I don't know, I might have read it somewhere. I'm not trying to steal anybody if they had that. But when I said that out loud to this kid, because we were talking for a while, and he just wasn't hearing it, and I was trying to do everything I could to help get this kid to understand. When I said that, I was like, man, anything worth having is going to be hard, and you're gonna have to do things you don't want to do it. So to succeed, you're gonna have to fail a lot. To invest, you're gonna have to give up to get, right. Training, if you want to invest in yourself and go back to college to get a skill or a degree or a certificate, whatever it might be, like it's going to be hard. Like it's fun to talk about. You have a dopamine rush, and it feels good to make a life change and do these things, but at the same time, it's like really hard, because at some point you're not going to want to do the thing. And that's where you can't rely on motivation, and you have to rely on discipline of doing the thing you don't want to do to achieve the thing you want to achieve. Because when you want to do the thing and you want to achieve it as motivation, like, yeah, I love running. I want to go for a run and I want to run a marathon. But when the real training sets in, you're like, I don't want to run 10 miles tonight. Like today was a horrible day. Like that's when you got to rely on it. And discipline always wins. Like if you think about it, anybody in that you look up to, like in respect, that have achieved great things that you want to achieve, you don't get there without discipline. Like you just don't. Any professional athlete, any business guru, any successful leader, anything, artist, content creator, like whatever you may be striving for, it takes time, and it takes discipline of doing the thing over and over and over and over and over again to achieve it, like that. And that's kind of the guaranteed. So those are the three that have absolutely transformed and changed my life. And I don't think you're going to get away with 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3 to achieve the thing you want to achieve. I'd love to know your thoughts on that. If you comment on, if you're watching this much, and on this, there's a small group of people doing it, but I'd be curious on like, what were your thoughts on those 3 things? Because those have been really transformative in my life, especially in the last probably year and a half, I'd say probably 2 years at this point. Once I realized it, I've leaned into it. So Now it's actually gotten to a point where once I kind of start that kind of fear, that little bit of like that pit in your stomach, or like the anxious thought, or the it could go wrong, it almost in a weird way makes me want to do the thing more. Because now I know the outcome. I know like the dopamine rush in your brain of like once you conquer something or do something when you're scared, like that feels better than anything else. Like that's the rush now, where I'm like, once I start getting that feeling, and it's gonna be kind of an embarrassing one. I've never flown, and I don't really like really crowded places and city, like really, I just don't. It's weird for me, I know. But now I want to fly to New York during Christmas with my wife. Like, and I'm so scared to do it for all the, there's no logic. Like I said, it's always illogical. I said that earlier with fear. Most of the time it's really unreasonable and illogical. But now I'm to the point like, I really want to do that because I know once I conquer it, I know once I do that, it's going to be the biggest rush ever. And it's going to free me. It's going to free me to like, I've talked about the compound effect, like now I'm going to want to fly everywhere. I'm going to experience so much more life because I can travel without the fear as much, So anyways, embarrassing, but there you go. Didn't expect to share that today. All this does, I think you can, for the most part, success is predictable. It's not as random, I think, as people want it to be, because it creates accountability for somebody to say, they did something I couldn't do. It's much easier to say, oh, they got lucky. It's hard to say that they were more disciplined than me. It's hard to say they had more courage than me. It's hard to say they were just smarter than me. Like, those are hard things to say in society and about others. But when you say like, no, they were better than me. They followed the recipe better than I did. They didn't quit when I quit. They were wiser. They took risk I wasn't willing to take. Like, yeah, that sucks. That stings. But now it's real, and now you understand. But I think today's world, social media, and everybody wants everything on a golden platter, and they think they deserve it. We see, oh, they got lucky. They didn't deserve that. And they see the outcome, but they didn't see all the input that went into it, all the successful people that have invested so much. It's so easy to say, oh, they should give away their money. They just shouldn't own this much of the company. They should, whatever it might be. But in reality, like, they followed the recipe, and they put, they put in the work. But when we start reframing, it's like, okay, I just messed up the recipe. Now it's the accountability is back on me. It's not like on some abstract luck bearing, deity that's saying you get to be successful in this business and you don't get the money and whatever it might be. So that's what I've seen for the most part. All right. So a biblical perspective on this topic. The entire Bible's about being wise, and the whole idea of wisdom is to seek God, seek the creator of the universe, the creator of you that created you to have a relationship with him and to have that relationship. The whole idea of seeking God is wisdom. And I want to say 1 Corinthians, I think it is 1 Corinthians 10. I'll have to look it up. But it talks about, somebody's critiquing it, saying, well, how does God allow the foolishness of the earth to happen? And he's saying that, even says Christ is wisdom at the end, but he talks about knowing and loving God and seeking Christ is wise, and Christ is God's wisdom given to earth, which is a very deep theological concept. But it does mention that, and even the entire book of Proverbs talks about wisdom, and this is King Solomon and King David, for the most part, writing these Proverbs, and the Proverbs are the Hebrew definition of wisdom at this time is chokmah, and it's like an understanding heart of right and wrong and what to do, and understanding internal and external humanity. Like, it's a deep wisdom, a deep understanding, a deep applied knowledge of like, hey, I'm understanding how to live on earth and I'm applying it. I understand what I'm supposed to, like, I have the knowledge of the Bible and I'm applying it. I have the knowledge of who God is and I'm applying it. And that would be the difference there, because reading the Bible is not going to save anyone. Going to church is not going to save anybody. The wisdom of applying the knowledge and believing in the word, believing in God, that belief, that faith is what saves us. And it's, I mentioned Ephesians 2, 8, 9 quite a bit, but we're saved by grace through faith, or saved by faith through grace, right? But it's all about the gift of believing and having that faith. That is the wise act. That is the wisdom. And in the book of James, it talks about praying and asking God for wisdom, and He will give it to you. So the entire Bible from beginning to end is wisdom. It's applied knowledge. It's living in relation to God. And then and it even specifically says in Proverbs, seek wisdom, or at all costs. It may cost all you have, but find and seek wisdom, right? So the importance of wisdom in your faith is, I probably couldn't be more, I don't know how I could explain it even more. It couldn't be more important than to be seeking wisdom and applying wisdom in your life when it comes to your faith. Courage. This is where I want to say it's in 2 Timothy. It talks about we were not given a spirit of fear, right? God does not give us like fear and courage, or fear and cowardice is not from God, right? That is from the enemy, who wants you to not fulfill what God has asked you to do, to separate you from God. So courage, by definition, is going to be a trait of God in you, of Christ in you, right? It's his sanctification of becoming like Christ makes us courageous, meaning we are to have boldness for speaking about Christ, but also to not conform with this world, right? So I think it's Romans 12:2, do not conform to the ways of the world, right? Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The idea to go against the grain of what popular culture is, the idea to stand up and say, no, this is not right, or this is not true, or say this is truth and this is right. It's boldness. It's courage. You do it scared, right? And that's what we've seen all through the Bible is a lot of these people are doing things that they know may not have good outcomes, like actual persecution, things, not like we don't fear somebody disliking a post. They're talking about getting crucified like Christ, or getting stoned to death, or getting boiled alive. Like those are the real fears they had, yet they still spoke up. And I'm talking about the disciples, the ones who followed Jesus around. That was a lot of their outcomes. A lot of them also died, were crucified, persecuted, killed. I think only one lived to an old age, and that was John. But I think that was after they attempted to boil him alive in oil. So when we're talking about courage, it's not just like the Instagram post, like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared to post this, I'm just going to post it anyway. It's like, it's a little deeper than that, although that could be a good courageous step for somebody. So faith requires courage, and it's a product of being in Christ and in God, right? So that's a heavy topic, one I really want to kind of tie into a bit more, because courage is one of those where nobody wants to be a coward, and we can justify just about anything. I think justification is one of the biggest manifestations of cowardice, is like, oh, no, I don't really need to go talk to that person. Or, yeah, I know they're saying that. I don't need to be the one that steps up and disagree. What's that going to say? I don't need to be one to go against the grain or talk against that, group because of whatever reason. Like, if you're justifying something in your brain, I think that is a red flashing light of like, hold up. Is this an opportunity to be courageous? Am I fearing this? Therefore, I'm going to rationalize and justify not doing it, or doing it if that's what everybody else is doing. I think when you start justifying, I think that could be almost like a point of contention for courage. So be cognizant of that. And once again, every time I've been courageous, and I'm not in the ways like others have, not even in a way worthy of probably mentioning on here, but it's always paid out. It's one of those, whether it's speaking to people, starting a Bible study, inviting people to my house, trying to have, real conversations. That courage has always led to, I think, a growth in my faith and a sanctification process, becoming a little bit more like Jesus was, and then, deepening my relationship with him. So courage for sure. And discipline. So the idea of discipline is mentioned. It's more defined as self-control. I think it's also fruit of the Spirit, but it's also, I think, in the same 2 Timothy verse I mentioned earlier. But it mentions self-control quite a bit. And the thing about self-control is we have to understand this is ourself in Christ now. It's not just ourself, because ourself got us into the mess. So when it talks about self-control, it's self-control in Christ. And one of those things, that there are daily habits that we are expected to do, right? There are elements that we need to do daily that strengthens and transforms our mind, right? So that same verse I mentioned earlier about, the transforming of your mind, to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Sorry. I think it's science is caught up, and we see like people like Andrew Huberman talking about neuroplasticity, of how your daily thought habits and patterns and actions actually rewire your brain. I think that is not far off from what's being said here. I think it's a lot deeper than that. But meditating on the word daily, I think it's in the book of Psalms. It talks about in all things we do, pray without ceasing. So praying aligns our will with God, because we're going and seeking Him and His wisdom, His will. Give thanks in all situations, rejoice for all the trials. Like, there's so many different things where it's like a consistent behavior of discipline, of like doing it, not when it's warm and fuzzy, not when it feels good, but in fact when it's hard, right? That is when discipline emerges, is the self-control to do the thing you don't want to do to achieve the thing you want to achieve. So whether it's resisting something and not doing something, not, whatever it might be, the discipline of choosing not to do something versus the choosing to make sure you do something, putting systems in place to where you're in the Word, you're fellowshipping with others, you're worshiping Him, you are, praying without ceasing, you're putting systems in place where it's like, I'm going to do a prayer journal and write, right when I wake up, right before I go to bed, I'm on lunch break, I'm going to, instead of listening to, goofy podcasts or books, I'm going to maybe listen to short sermon series. I'm going to listen to the Bible Project. I'm going to do, devotionals. And it's not all at once. I'm not saying change your entire life right now, but just like the book Atomic Habits, which once again, I think this is where the Bible, science catches up with the Bible. Like, God asks us to do these little things all the time, and that starts transforming us. Like praying before your meal. Like, if you want, if I want my kids to be grateful, like that's a goal of a parent, is to have grateful kids, right? That is a way I can show gratitude 2 to 3 times a day, of like, God, I'm so thankful for the food you've given me. I'm thankful that we have this opportunity to sit as a family. I'm thankful, I'm grateful. Your kids are hearing you and saying that. You might think, oh yeah, I'm just grateful. Everybody knows that. Kids more caught than taught. All they know is I get fed more than likely. If you're in the America in the West, right, you're probably eating every day, whether it's something cheap or not so cheap, may not be steak and lobster, but your kids are probably used to eating almost every day, right? So are we sure that we're teaching gratitude, right? That's the little disciplines of how we model that. When it's saying do this in remembrance of me, breaking bread and communion, like the things we do matter, and the discipline that we have, the disciplines, right, matter. Okay. So, discipline, self-control, 100% all in the Bible. So that's one of those. And I speak more anecdotally, meaning like this, I've applied this to my life, and this, I've seen it, like this works. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. Like, it's one of those, when we put our ideas and opinions out there online, like it's very scary, but like when I know it's something I've done, I know when it's applied to me, I know like whether 1,000 people agree with this or not, like I know, or disagree with this, I know it's worked for my life, and I know it applies. I know it's biblical. I know I read it. So I've had a little more confidence when it comes to that, because it's once again kind of the wisdom of applied knowledge. Like, yeah, I think there was a podcast I was listening to, and it says one of the traits of a liar is to try to justify that they're not lying. And it kind of blew my mind, because I think about times in my life of like, maybe I didn't tell the truth, whether it's like tell mom and dad something, or trying to blame something on my brother, or like all the goofy stuff, like above and beyond trying to convince somebody this happened, when it may not have. And it could have been the goofiest stuff, or it could have been like I got in trouble at school, or whatever. You're right. You've probably been there, maybe, or maybe it's just me. But the times where I know 100% like this, what I'm telling you right here, like I'm not going to start arguing with anybody about this, because like, for one, I can show you biblically with context but at the same time, I can show you the fruit of my life. It's like, I don't have to go above and beyond to like try to win you over. And I'm not saying this in like I don't know, I don't want it to come out as like a arrogant or cocky way, but it was just a realization I had of like, oh, this is applied to my life and it works. And then it's easier to speak about it when I know it's applied, right? So I'm not trying to sound, it kind of sounded a little bit arrogant and contentious, but I wasn't trying to be that way. So here's a couple of issues. A lot of times as we chase we see an outcome, but we chase the wrong ingredients. So for example, I want peace and I want joy, but I seek money and relationships or, you know, power, career, status to achieve that, and you're not going to achieve it with those things. Like those things can help, and those things aren't bad in their own way. But when you try to say, hey, the recipe ends with peace and joy, like money, success, comfort, power, pleasure isn't how you get there. So, and this is where we see in Galatians when Paul is writing to Galatia, he's writing, and he gives a very stark contrast of like, this is the recipe of the world, and this is the recipe of Christ. And what I mean by recipe, like this is the input and the output, and then this is the input and the output. So when a life lived for what I would call the world, a life lived for the flesh, meaning like my selfish, pleasure on earth, right? It'd be kind of like individualism, like doing what's best for me, or hedonism. When it talks about those actions lived for the flesh, or acts of the flesh is how the Bible explains it in Galatians 5. I think it's 5:19 through 23. The result, the recipe, what you're going to end with, right, is going to be anger, jealousy, selfish ambition, division. I think it says, use the words faction, addiction, brokenness, like that. That is where it leads. And once again, in my life, 100%, that's what happens, right? And we see it in the world, and that's when we see people who turn to the bottle, turn to alcohol, turn to all these other things to try to solve problems that they have the wrong ingredients for the wrong outcome, right? And a life lived for self is a life that's like the worst life for yourself, which is ironic, right? Vice versa, a life surrendered to Christ produces what we call the fruit of the Spirit, meaning Christ in us. When we surrender our life, instead of us seeking for us, right, our flesh and worldly desire, we are now surrendering our will to Jesus, to God's will. Then we're transformed, right? And with the daily discipline of being sanctified like Christ, we become more like Him. What's produced? What's the recipe, right? What ends when I have a life surrendered to Christ? All right, well, the fruit of the Spirit is going to be love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness, self-control is one of them. So that is the recipe, right? It's not it's not a secret. God's not trying to hide it from you. It's evident in our world. Scroll social media, look at your life, review it, look at the people in your life. See when you see somebody who really has a peace that you don't understand. Like I can think about 4 to 5 people in my life right now that I can call up and text that I know I sought them out because I saw the fruit of the Christ in their life. At the time, I didn't know what it was called. I was just a lost kid seeking myself and all the pleasure and all that stuff. But when I saw a few people, I'm like, man, there's something different about that person. They have a peace that I don't understand. They have it seems like they just have joy. Like they don't get mad super easy. They speak with just truth and courage. Like I remember seeing that as like somebody who didn't know Christ, wasn't saved, didn't know anything about walking into a church when I was 18, like had no idea about anything. So like there's something different about that person. And that's what it was. So it's once again kind of coming back to it, like I don't know how else to explain it other than like, hey, look at my life. I can show you all the broken masterpieces with the acts of flesh. I can show you like verbatim with detail. I probably wouldn't just release it on here like this, but one-on-one would love to talk to anybody, right? And then I can show you the exact confirmation of fruit of the Spirit in my life. Like it's 100% there. Like the more I surrender, the more I see this, the more discipline I build up and seek God and seek Christ and anchor my life there. Like the fruit of love and joy and peace and patience, I can't explain it other than just look at my life. And like, if I had a chance to talk to you guys individually, which I'd love to do some like live streams at some point to where it's a little bit more back and forth and I can like specifically say certain things, like it would be so evident. So, and that's how I see the recipe. That's how I see the input and output. The input of seeking the flesh and the world and comfort and, whether it's power, seeking all the things of the world, the flesh that you think is going to make you feel complete and whole, that's the wrong recipe, man. That's just, you're putting the wrong input for the output, right? But when you put Christ first, then the outcome is exactly what it states. And it's not hidden. Like I said, Bible's going to tell you, I'm telling you right now. You have friends that want to tell you this right now. You have, scroll social media, you see the broken world. See what happens when man takes over the world, man takes over government, man takes over organizations. Some bad things happen, right? But when people put Christ first and surrender His will, some great things happen. Okay. All right. Guys, enjoyed writing this one. This was a fun one to write. The name I didn't like as much on the Don't Be Surprised, but predictable outcomes. That's what I would keep in mind for this one. Like, what is the outcome? What is the likely outcome of this input that I'm using? All right. Or if this is the outcome I want, what is the input that's going to require to get there? It's not going to be a secret. Seek wisdom, right? Have courage, build some discipline. You guys can do it. It's worth it. All right. Seek it at all costs. Other than that, guys, have a great week. Life's good. Go make the most of it. I'm going to be posting here weekly. Still working. I have a couple things in the works I'm very excited to release. It's got a lot of short form stuff. It's going to be like, I have probably about 30 short form, minute or so videos that I'm going to release on different platforms. So once you start seeing those short videos, hopefully you see a repetition there. My goal is to eventually get to at least one video short form per day, and then one long form video. And then there's some more writing stuff that's in the works that I'm very excited about. 2027, it looks like summer 2027. I think I got the next book release. That's the first time I spoke into existence right there. So that was pretty cool to say it out loud. But I'm very, very excited on it. More details to come on that soon, guys. Check it out. Y'all have a good one. See ya.